All right, last time we were talking about nature connection. That's one of the goals of the course is to uh, influence our nature connection and how we are part of nature and how we get back to feeling really in tune with nature. And we talked about also that we're really kind of in a big mess right now. The planet, human well-being is on the decline. You read about children's well-being. We've got it at all age groups. We've got all sorts of epidemics of mental illness, suicide, drug addiction. The lifespan has shrunk in the United States for the last 3 years. And folks under age 50 are at a health disadvantage compared to other citizens of other nations, and child well-being ranks near the bottom. So something's not right. Doesn't have to be this way. Uh, at the same time, our Earth systems are breaking down. We've got various scientific reports out telling us about climate instability, melting of ice caps, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We've got massive ecological disruptions happening, massive poisoning of soil, air, water, our bodies even, and wildlife is decreased in various measures by 40 to 50% in the last 40 years. So before you were born, things started to go wrong, and they're still going wrong. And it turns out that humanity really is the only species that is destroying its habitat for itself as well as for other species. So a lot of bad news. We really don't want to hear this news. We don't want to hear that we're in the Anthropocene, which is defined as the current geological age viewed as the period during which human activity has been the dominant influence on climate and the environment, where because of proliferation of global greenhouse gases, extermination of biological and cultural diversity, and toxification of everything. So that's the Anthropocene going on right now. We've moved into this age. So our beautiful planet then, instead of looking like this everywhere, is turning into looking like this, devastation everywhere because of the way we're acting, and we're causing then the sixth extinction, sixth mass extinction on the planet. And you can see the beauties of the oceans here that now are looking more like this, and various plastics everywhere throughout the food chain now. Microscopic. You can't even identify them, see them in the water systems and so on. So bad news. And so we ask why? And the position in this class that you're learning about is that we've misunderstood our relationships, and we've misunderstood how to raise children. But right now I'm talking about those relationships. So what does that mean? We forgot that we're really part of the tree of life. Look at the DNA that we share, our genetics. So biology is now telling us, whoa, we're all connected here. Look at, we share 99.99% of our genes with one another. And with our cousins, the bonobos and chimps, 98%. Going down, I mentioned last time, bananas, 50% of your genes are shared with bananas. Even rice and bacteria, we are all connected at some level genetically. At the same time, physics is telling us we're all connected and everything we do is reverberating around us. So at the quantum level, we're all bodies of energy and we're moving among other bodies of energy like this. So, and why don't we understand our relational connections? Our ancestors did. They knew that they were part of a living earth. And so what this class is pointing out is that we have species atypical development that we've embraced in the last hundreds of years, especially recently, and over the course of civilization. And so this kind of species atypical development is going to undermine then our sense of connection, our capacity for connection, our awareness of connection. And we extend that not only to each other, which we're trying to work on our connecting abilities, right? That's what we talked about the first day, is how to connect to humans. And we start each class with a welcoming, acknowledgement, a sharing, a listening. thankfulness. That's trying to build our just automatic habits of doing that. Something I didn't do for a long time because I was so task oriented. It's like, let's just get the job done. Who wants to say hello? Right? Crazy. But that's because we're very much about efficiency in this culture, and I really embrace that. And then we also then develop, because of that lack of the evolved nest, which we're talking about and starting to talk about today, is we develop more of an egocentrism and then an anthropocentrism, that only humans really matter, and then only our culture matters, ethnocentrism. So we get all these centrisms or trisms happening, and we forget that we're connected. And these effects of the early experience are really long term. If you don't have intervention, or try to do interventions in this course, right? Try to build our connecting capacities to each other and to the natural world. So you can see in this diagram the kind of different trajectories that are possible for human development. Just, I mean, there's probably a million of them, but this is in general. So the top one is showing you what's normal for our species: to be immersed in nature, to perform a vision quest in adolescence where you go out by yourself and you connect to the natural world. You find your gift, you feel tuned in, and you just develop over childhood, because you spend so much time outside, a relational attunement to nature. And this includes people. This includes your village, your band. And then that first then cloud on the right side is what's our original species typical outcome. It's to be cooperative, communal, receptively intelligent, to grow into wisdom, and all this kind of moral relational attunement and sense of responsibility includes the natural world. Now you see in the middle there, what we've done in civilization and recently more is to not really provide the nest you see on the left. And so you go in that blue line, you develop some self-regulation and some cooperation and some communalism, and then you get that right blue cloud, a species typical outcome for us today. We're pretty cooperative. We can be communal and intelligent and wise to some degree with one another, but we're very much focused on humans, human beings, not the rest of the world. And then you can see that red arrow, trauma. If trauma occurs, whoops, you don't even get that. So if you're abused as a child, sexually, physically, have high adverse childhood experiences, you're going to go down to the bottom um, cloud there, which also occurs if you haven't had a good nest at all, which leads to that orange arrow, which is about dysregulation. You don't feel quite comfortable. You're kind of anxious, depressed. Those are signs of dysregulation. You're more oppositional, embracing against others because you had to do that to survive, and your frame becomes one of protectionism. And so you end up with a species atypical outcome, which includes oppositionalism, kind of an automatic kind of bracing against others, more of an egocentrism, and then when you use your imagination, it's more detached from relationships, moral self-protectionism. So I'm describing stuff that I've experienced myself. So I'm not, trying to corner you guys or anybody else. This is what I've identified based on what, if you study our ancestral context, that top context, you can see that they have a different developmental course. They have different outcomes, different personalities in adulthood, child especially. And then we have these kind of messed up pathways. So that's what the class is about. And we're trying to get back to that upper branch, that upper trajectory. And so what we're wanting you to practice this semester then is core routines, to pick 1, 2, 3, try them all. Now you've got some in the coping skills workbook worksheet, has some of these things in it. At least the wandering is there. The gratitude, I think, is there. The storytelling, journaling. But we will talk more about these and ask you to really practice them so that you've developed the habits now while you're young and you carry them forward. The other thing that is required, so we're talking about bottom-up kind of changes. How do you get yourself comfortable and skilled in connecting? You also have to change the story that guides your view of the world. So David Corton pointed this out, that right now we've been involved in supporting a story about sacred money in markets. That they're more important than anything else. That's the highest value, and everything decision making is about that. Whereas our ancestral condition and those who live sustainably have a sacred life and living earth story, that everything is alive. Of course, if you've lost the sense of connection, you don't feel it, right? So that's why we work on getting that back. But to re-embrace the sacred life and living earth story then will help us get back to a sustainable way of living with the natural world and one another. And that view is contrasted. So with the modern view, you can see on the right, the left side, the purple, this is sort of what we assumed from the last few hundred years, that the world is fragmented, disenchanted, nothing magical or sacred, amoral, it's all random. And only humans really have spirit, only humans really matter in the world. Humans are the pinnacle, right, of evolution or creation, depending on your other stories. And then we kind of are rather restless. I think it's normal to be restless on the planet, to not feel rooted in a particular landscape, that this is my relational context of the river and the tree and the mountain, wherever we are. And instead of conforming ourselves to the landscape, we want to conform the landscape to us. So we think that's all normal, right? That has been normal, and that has been able to work for a while. The right side of the diagram, this is the most common view of most cultures and throughout human existence, that the world is unified, sacred, moral. Spirit pervades everything. There's sentience everywhere. Consciousness of some sort is everywhere, and that we're all mutually related, that humans really are the younger siblings. Mosses have been around for 400 million years. We've only been around for a couple million, depending on how you count the genus or the species. So we know very little really relative to these ancient life forms. And the other characteristics are to feel at home on the earth, that this is our home. We belong to the earth doesn't belong to us, and to fit ourselves in with the local landscape. Every landscape's a little different in terms of what it needs and how it thrives, and to understand that. And that's what Native Americans have known forever. They've been devastated by genocidal practices, but if we get back to that wisdom, that's indigenous wisdom. And if you look at, on the right side is traditional wisdom, which is the Christian traditions in the West. These are more mystical, advanced in those religions. I'm sorry, on the right side. And then on the left side is what I call primal wisdom. That's the indigenous wisdom. You can see there's a lot of things they share. So there's the sense that wisdom exists beyond intellect. You can't just think your way to wisdom. You got to feel, you have to sense, and it accesses other realms than what we see in front of our faces with our senses, that we have special responsibilities to act in a way that's co-creating flourishing, and that we surrender ourselves to that energy realm. The energy we have among us is part of, what enlivens us. And so you have to detach from your particular ego of the moment, your self-image. And it's also a matter of state dependency. So if you're all stressed out, you're not going to be wise. You have to be able to be calm. And that's why we're practicing calming, and the sense of being one and in that open-hearted way of love. So you have to overcome your fears. And there's practices. All the Western wisdom traditions have practices for how to help yourself do these things as an adult. What's interesting, though, are two differences between the two, especially. You see, compassion in the Native American indigenous view is that you are compassionate towards all the natural world, whereas in the Western tradition, it's towards other people only, again, because of that anthropocentrism that's just gotten more and more tight over the years. And the other one is that what's feared most in the indigenous wisdom or primal wisdom is alienation from your animal nature, your tuned in animal body. Remember we talked about how you can sense things without seeing them, or, having an awareness beyond what we usually think is normal. Whereas in the Western tradition, that's fear. You fear that animal nature. And my hypothesis about this is that's because if you don't provide the evolved nest, to children, they get dysregulated, and then it looks like that's an animal nature. So you get afraid of that nature and you've got to punish the child into being obedient because they're so dysregulated, right? So we can talk more about that too. Um, so that's what's missing in my view is you're missing the nature connection and you're missing the regulation that babies would normally get from the nest. And that's why the Western approach has those things missing. So what do? We are to remember then that we are communers with and supporters of life, to build a sense of placefulness and attachment to the local landscape, which is the opposite of the stuff that we usually see: restlessness, placelessness, searching, always moving, and what the Asian traditions call hungry ghosts, empty inside, always eating and consuming. So, Indigenous wisdom, really, this is a great quote from Aldo Leopold, who used to be kind of a marauder of the natural world, and then he actually became a naturalist. Um, and it happened when he, in his story about thinking like a mountain, he talks about, if you saw a wolf, you just shot him. And that's just what you did for the last few hundred years in the European mindset. And he shot this wolf and then he watched it die. And there was a fire in the eyes of that wolf that just captured him. It's like, oh my God, what did I do? And he changed. He became a naturalist wanting to preserve biological diversity. Something similar, Albert Schweitzer was a hero of mine as a child. He used to shoot slingshot stones at birds to kill them. And one time when he was aiming for a bird, the church bells rang, which brought him out of that mode. And he woke up and thought, what am I doing? I'm killing a living being. So those moments of waking up are really important to pay attention to. And that's what this quote helps us do. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. So this is just for the people watching. Thanks very much.